I was in a car accident with my wife and found out that she was cheating on me while she was at the hospital. It was a crisp autumn evening, the kind where the air is filled with the earthy scent of fallen leaves, and the sun casts a golden hue over the landscape. Emma and I were driving back from a weekend getaway in the countryside. This trip was meant to be a balm for our strained relationship, a chance to reconnect and rekindle the romance that had been gradually fading. We had been together for nearly a decade, and lately the daily grind and constant pressures of life had taken a toll on our marriage. The winding roads were slick from an earlier rain, and I was driving cautiously, hands gripping the steering wheel. Emma sat beside me, her attention divided between the passing scenery and her phone. She would occasionally glance up to comment on the picturesque landscape, or share a snippet from a funny video she had stumbled upon. Our favorite songs played softly in the background, creating a semblance of normalcy that belied the tension simmering beneath the surface. We were chatting about trivial things: VDJ, the new restaurant that had opened in town, plans for the upcoming holidays, and a movie we both wanted to see. Despite the casual conversation, there was an underlying unease that neither of us addressed. I remember thinking that perhaps this weekend had been a turning point for us, that maybe we could find our way back to each other. Suddenly, a deer darted across the road. I swerved instinctively, the car's tires losing grip on the wet pavement. Everything happened in a blur. The car spun out of control, crashing through the guardrail and tumbling down an embankment. The cacophony of metal crunching and glass shattering was deafening. Emma's screams echoed in my ears, but there was nothing I could do. When the car finally came to a stop, we were upside down. The world around us was eerily silent, save for the distant wail of sirens. My head was throbbing, and my vision blurred as I turned to check on Emma. She was unconscious, blood trickling down her forehead. Panic surged through me. I fumbled with my seatbelt, my hands trembling, and managed to free myself. I crawled out of the wreckage, my body aching, and staggered around to Emma's side. The door was jammed, and I yelled for help, my voice raw and desperate. The sirens grew louder, and within minutes, paramedics arrived. They pried the door open and carefully extracted Emma, placing her on a stretcher. They did the same for me, but my eyes never left her motionless form. We were rushed to the nearest hospital, Emma taken straight into surgery. I was wheeled into an examination room, where doctors and nurses tended to my injuries. I had a concussion, a few broken ribs, and numerous cuts and bruises. Despite the pain, all I could think about was Emma. Hours passed, though it felt like an eternity. Finally, a doctor came to see me. He assured me that Emma was stable, but had suffered a severe head injury and multiple fractures. She would need to stay in the ICU for a while. I was allowed to see her briefly. Emma lay in the hospital bed, tubes and wires attached to her, machines beeping rhythmically. I held her hand, whispering to her, telling her I was there and that everything would be okay. She didn't respond, but I hoped she could hear me. Over the next few days, I barely left her side. Friends and family visited, offering their support. My parents flew in from out of state, and Emma's sister, Lily, was a constant presence. We took turns sitting with Emma, hoping for any sign of improvement. One evening, as I sat by her bed, holding her hand and talking to her about the memories we shared, her phone buzzed on the bedside table. It had been silent since the accident, and I almost didn't notice it. But something compelled me to pick it up. The message on the screen was from a contact saved as Matt. It read, "Hey babe, how are you holding up? I miss you." A chill ran down my spine. I tried to rationalize ITVDJ, maybe it was just a friend checking in. But the term babe gnawed at me. My heart pounded as I scrolled through her messages. What I found shattered me more than any physical injury ever could. There were dozens of messages, photos, and even videos exchanged between Emma and this Matt. The conversations were intimate, filled with confessions of love and plans for the future. They had been seeing each other for months, right under my nose. I felt sick to my stomach. I dropped the phone, my hands shaking uncontrollably. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. Emma, the woman I had loved and trusted for years, was having an affair. The realization hit me like a ton of bricks, and I felt an overwhelming sense of betrayal and heartbreak. Tears welled up in my eyes as I looked at Emma, lying there unconscious and vulnerable. Part of me wanted to confront her, to scream and demand answers. But another part of me knew that now was not the time. She was fighting for her life, and I couldn't add to her burden. I stepped out of the room, needing air. The hospital corridor was dimly lit and quiet. I leaned against the wall, struggling to breathe. My mind was racing, memories of our life together flashing before my eyes. How could she do this to me? To us? Lily found me a few minutes later. She took one look at my face and knew something was wrong. "What happened?" she asked, her voice full of concern. I handed her Emma's phone, unable to speak. She read the messages, her expression turning from confusion to shock and then to anger. I can't believe this, she whispered. I'm so sorry. We sat in silence for a while, the weight of the situation pressing down on us. I felt like I was drowning in a sea of emotions: VDJ hurt, anger, betrayal, and sadness all mixed together. I didn't know what to do or how to process what I had just discovered. Over the next few days, I tried to focus on Emma's recovery. I put on a brave face, pretending that everything was fine when inside, I was falling apart. I couldn't eat or sleep, my mind constantly replaying the messages and the images I had seen. I felt like I was living in a nightmare. Finally, a week after the accident, Emma woke up. Her eyes fluttered open, and she looked around the room, confused. When she saw me, she tried to smile, but it quickly turned into a wince of pain. Hey, she croaked, her voice weak. Hey, I replied, forcing a smile. How are you feeling? Sore, she said, her eyes filling with tears. What happened? I explained the accident to her, leaving out the part about what I had discovered. She nodded, tears streaming down her face. I'm so sorry, she whispered. I should have been paying more attention. It's not your fault, I said, though the words felt hollow. We talked for a while longer, but there was an elephant in the room that neither of us acknowledged. I couldn't bring myself to confront her yet. Emma's recovery was slow but steady. As the days turned into weeks, she regained her strength, and the doctors were optimistic about her prognosis. But the emotional distance between us grew. I found it harder and harder to pretend that everything was okay. One evening, after everyone had left and it was just the two of us, I decided it was time. I couldn't keep living with the weight of her betrayal on my shoulders. I needed answers. Emma, I said softly, sitting down next to her bed. We need to talk. She looked at me, her eyes full of apprehension. What is it? I took a deep breath, trying to steady my voice. I know about Matt. Her face went pale and she looked away, unable to meet my gaze. How did you find out? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Your phone, I said. It buzzed, and I saw the message. I saw everything. Tears welled up in her eyes and she started to sob. I'm so sorry, she cried. I never meant to hurt you. Why Emma? I asked, my voice breaking. Why did you do it? She wiped her eyes, taking a shaky breath. I don't know, she said. I was lonely. You were always working, and I felt like we were drifting apart. Matt was there, and I made a mistake. A terrible mistake. Her words cut deep, but they also gave me some clarity. I had been working long hours, trying to provide for us, but in the process, I had neglected our relationship. It didn't excuse what she had done, but it helped me understand. I don't know if I can forgive you, I said, my voice trembling, but I need time to figure things out. Emma nodded, tears streaming down her face. I understand, she said. I'll do whatever it takes to make things right. We sat in silence for a long time, the weight of the situation pressing down on us. I didn't know what the future held for us, but I knew that things would never be the same. The trust we had built over the years was shattered, and it would take a lot of time and effort to rebuild it. As I left the hospital that night, I felt a strange sense of relief. The truth was out, and now we could start to heal. Whether that meant staying together or going our separate ways, I didn't know. But for the first time in weeks, I felt like I could breathe again. The road ahead was uncertain, and there would be many challenges to face. But I was determined to take it one day at a time, hoping that eventually we would find our way back to each other. Or, if not, that we would find peace and happiness apart. Emma's recovery continued to progress, and after a few more weeks, she was discharged from the hospital. We returned home to a house that felt both familiar and foreign. The walls seemed to close in on us, the silence between us heavy and suffocating. Our friends and family tried to be supportive, but their presence often felt intrusive. They knew something was wrong, but we had decided to keep the details of Emma's affair private. It was our burden to bear, and I wasn't ready to share it with the world. One evening, about a month after the accident, I found myself sitting alone in our living room, a glass of whiskey in hand. The house was quiet, Emma having gone to bed early. I stared at the photos on the mantelpiece, VDJ snapshots of happier times. Our wedding day, vacations, family gatherings. Each image was a reminder of the life we had built together, now tainted by betrayal. I heard footsteps behind me and turned to see Emma standing in the doorway. She looked fragile, her eyes haunted. Can we talk? She asked softly. I nodded, gesturing for her to sit. She took a seat across from me, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. I've been doing a lot of thinking, she began, her voice trembling, about us, about what happened, and I realized that I need to take responsibility for my actions. I listened, my heart aching. I made a mistake, she continued. I let my loneliness and insecurities get the better of me, but I want to fix this. I want to make things right between us, if you'll let me. Her words hung in the air, and I struggled to find a response. I appreciate that, Emma, I finally said, but it's not going to be easy. The trust we had is broken, and it will take time to rebuild it, if we can at all. She nodded, tears streaming down her face. I know, and I'm willing to do whatever it takes. Counseling, therapy, anything. I just want a chance to make things right. We sat in silence for a long time, the enormity of the situation weighing heavily on us. Finally, I spoke. I think we should see a therapist, together and individually. We need help to navigate this. Emma agreed, and the next day, we began the process of finding a therapist. It wasn't easy, and there were times when I wondered if it was worth it, but we were both committed to trying, to seeing if there was a way to salvage our marriage. Our first therapy session was nerve-wracking. We sat in the waiting room, both of us fidgeting nervously. When we were called in, the therapist, Dr. Harper, greeted us warmly and led us to her office. It was a cozy space, with comfortable chairs and soft lighting. Dr. Harper began by asking us to share our story, to explain what had brought us to her. Emma and I took turns speaking, recounting the accident and the discovery of her affair. It was painful to relive those moments, but it was also cathartic. Dr. Harper listened attentively, her expression compassionate. When we finished, she nodded thoughtfully. Infidelity is one of the most challenging issues a couple can face, she said, but it's not insurmountable. With time, effort, and a commitment to healing, it is possible to rebuild trust and move forward. She explained that we would need to address both the affair and the underlying issues in our marriage that had led to it. It wouldn't be easy, and there would be no quick fixes. But if we were both willing to put in the work, there was hope. Our sessions with Dr. Harper became a regular part of our routine. We learned to communicate more effectively, to express our feelings and needs without judgment or blame. We also began individual therapy, which helped us to address our own personal struggles and insecurities. There were days when I felt overwhelmed by anger and sadness, days when I wondered if we were making any progress at all, but there were also moments of clarity and connection. Moments when I saw glimpses of the love we once shared. One evening, after a particularly intense therapy session, Emma and I sat together on the couch, holding hands. I know it hasn't been easy, she said softly, but I want you to know how grateful I am for this chance. For us. I squeezed her hand, my heart aching with a mix of pain and hope. Me too, I replied. It's been hard, but I believe we can get through this. Together. As the months passed, we continued to work on our relationship. We made a conscious effort to spend more quality time together, to prioritize our marriage over the demands of work and other obligations. We went on dates, took weekend trips, and rediscovered the joy of simply being together. There were setbacks along the way, moments when old wounds were reopened and trust was tested. But each time, we chose to face those challenges head-on, to confront our fears and insecurities rather than running from them. Slowly but surely, the distance between us began to close. The love that had once felt so distant started to re-emerge, stronger and more resilient than before. We learned to appreciate each other in new ways, to see the value in our shared history and the potential for our future. One day, about a year after the accident, Emma and I decided to revisit the place where it all began, VDJ, the countryside where we had taken our fateful trip. It was a symbolic gesture, a way of acknowledging the past while looking forward to the future. We walked hand in hand through the familiar landscape, the memories of that day both painful and poignant. As we stood by the edge of the embankment where our car had crashed, I felt a sense of closure. The accident had been a turning point, a moment that had forced us to confront the fractures in our relationship and find a way to heal. I love you, Emma said, her voice filled with emotion. Thank you for giving us this chance. I turned to her, my heart full. I love you too, I replied. And I'm glad we took this journey together. We stood there for a while longer, the autumn breeze gently rustling the leaves around us. The road ahead was still uncertain, but we were ready to face it together, stronger and more united than ever before. As we made our way back to the car, I felt a sense of peace and hope. Our journey had been difficult, but it had also brought us closer and deepened our love for each other. We had faced our darkest moments and come out on the other side, ready to embrace whatever the future held. And so, with a renewed sense of purpose and commitment, we drove back home, ready to build a new chapter in our lives, VDJ, one filled with love, trust, and the promise of a brighter tomorrow. You're ready for the second story. My ex-husband who cheated on me with my sister emailed me after 6 years. It was a quiet evening in late October, the kind that held a crisp chill and a promise of an early winter. I was curled up on my old, worn-out armchair, a cup of chamomile tea warming my hands as I flipped through the pages of a book. The soft hum of the central heating and the occasional rustle of the pages were the only sounds breaking the silence in my small apartment. As the clock ticked closer to midnight, I decided to check my emails one last time before heading to bed. It had become a nightly ritual, a way to ensure I hadn't missed anything important. My inbox was mostly filled with the usual VJ newsletters, promotional offers, and a few work-related messages. But then, nestled between an advertisement for winter coats and a reminder about a dentist appointment, was an email that made my heart skip a beat. The subject line read, "It's been a long time." My fingers hovered over the mouse, a mix of curiosity and dread coursing through me. I hesitated, knowing all too well who the sender was. The email address was unmistakable. James, my ex-husband, the man who had shattered my world 6 years ago. Taking a deep breath, I clicked on the email and began to read. From James Peterson to Rachel Morgan. Subject, "It's been a long time." Date, October 24th, 2024, 11:42 p.m. Hi Rachel. I hope this email finds you well. It's been a long time since we last spoke, and there's not a day that goes by where I don't think about everything that happened between us. I've wanted to reach out countless times but never found the right words. Even now I'm not sure if I do, but here I am typing away in the hope that you'll read this. First and foremost, I owe you an apology. No, I owe you more than that. I owe you an explanation, an acknowledgement of the pain I caused, and a sincere apology for the hurt I inflicted on you. What I did was unforgivable, and I know that. Cheating on you with your sister was the worst mistake of my life, and I've regretted it every single day since. After we divorced, I was a mess. I know that doesn't excuse my actions, but I want you to know that I have spent the past 6 years trying to understand why I did what I did and working to become a better person. Therapy, self-reflection, and time have given me some insight, but the guilt and shame remain. I know it's a lot to ask, but if you can find it in your heart to forgive me, even just a little, it would mean the world to me. I'm not asking for us to reconcile or to go back to how things were. I just want you to know that I'm truly sorry and that I'm striving to be someone better than the man who hurt you. Take care, Rachel. James. My hands trembled as I finished reading the email. A flood of emotions washed over me, DJ anger, sadness, confusion, and an odd sense of closure I hadn't expected. Memories I had buried deep began to resurface, each one tugging at my heartstrings with relentless persistence. James and I had met in college, our connection instant and intense. We were inseparable, our love story one that seemed destined for a happily ever after. But life has a way of throwing curveballs, and ours came in the form of betrayal. The discovery of his affair with my sister Emily was a blow from which I thought I would never recover. Emily and I had been close once, the kind of sisters who shared secrets and dreams, but her betrayal cut deeper than any wound I had ever known. The aftermath was messy, filled with accusations, tears, and a chasm that seemed impossible to bridge. Our family was torn apart, and I found myself alone, picking up the pieces of a shattered life. In the years since, I had rebuilt myself. I found solace in my work, made new friends, and even started dating again, albeit cautiously. But the scars remained, a constant reminder of the trust that had been broken. Seeing James's email brought those scars back to the surface, raw and painful. I closed my laptop and stared at the ceiling, the weight of his words pressing down on me. Forgiveness. It was a concept I had grappled with for years. Could I truly forgive him? Did I even want to? Part of me yearned to let go of the bitterness that had taken root in my heart, but another part clung to it, afraid that forgiveness would somehow diminish the pain I had endured. The night passed in a blur of restless thoughts and fitful sleep. When morning came, I found myself drawn to the email once more. I read it again, slower this time, absorbing each word. James had hurt me in ways I never thought possible, but his remorse seemed genuine. Perhaps after all these years, it was time to confront the past. I sat at my desk, the cursor blinking on the blank screen. My mind raced with 1,000 thoughts, but I knew I had to respond. Not for him, but for me. Taking a deep breath, I began to type. From Rachel Morgan to James Peterson. Subject, it's been a long time. Date, October 25th, 2024, 8:15 a.m. James, thank you for reaching out. I'll admit, seeing your name in my inbox was a shock, and reading your email brought back a lot of emotions I thought I had buried. Your apology is long overdue, but I appreciate it nonetheless. What you did was devastating. It broke me in ways I can't fully express, and the betrayal from both you and Emily left scars that have taken years to heal. Forgiveness is not something I can give lightly, and I'm not sure if I'm ready to fully forgive you. But I can acknowledge your efforts to become a better person and your willingness to take responsibility for your actions. I'm in a better place now, and while the pain of the past still lingers, I'm learning to move forward. I hope that you too have found some semblance of peace and that you continue on your journey of self-improvement. Take care, Rachel. As I hit send, a sense of relief washed over me. It wasn't a full forgiveness, but it was a step towards closure. The past would always be a part of me, but it no longer had to define me. I could finally start to let go and look towards the future with hope.